Hello and welcome to Redeemer's Practical Prayer Course. This is session 4. We're going to talk about distractions. Now, if you haven't seen the other 3 sessions, you can go to redeemermcr.com/prayer, and all of these are on there, as well as other resources like links to other helpful books or apps, also a discussion guide, all sorts of things like that. So head there if you haven't yet already. So let's talk about distractions. Last session we talked about listening, maybe more real life. Now let's talk about distractions. What is the modern world except for learning how to manage and walk through distractions? It's all over the place. If you have kids, I don't really need to give any more examples. If you have a career, emails always come through, right? If you have friends are always interacting with you. If you have any kind of hobbies, if you have a brain that works a little bit faster than normal, if you have any kind of anxieties, all sorts of things. I don't know if I need to really list them all, even though I just did sort of. We all have these distractions. And I think maybe what we think of a good prayer life is something almost like a Zen mode where we're meditating and we're slightly hovering off the ground and there's no distractions. It's completely silent. It's like we're in like a sensory deprivation kind of box and we're just communing one-to-one with God. But that's just not real life. And, maybe those times will happen. I don't think I've ever had a time like that. But, that would be great. But let's just talk about what does it mean to pray in real life. It means how to deal with distractions. So let's talk about that. We'll talk about some ways to get around them, but then also maybe talk about the distractions themselves as bringing them into your prayer life instead of trying to fight them all the time. So here's a couple things. What do we do when we drift? Because we will all drift. Well, we do that in conversation anyway, but we're all going to drift. Our minds and things will go to all sorts of places. What do? The first thing is if you find yourself, if it's impossible to pray because your brain is always drifting, it might be helpful to come up with use some kind of plan. Like we talked about the acronym ACTS, we talked about the acronym PRAY, I talked about the Lord's Prayer, of course. There might be something like that might be helpful. But here's other ways to maybe get around them. First one is to vocalize your prayers, to pray out loud. Now, it doesn't have to be super loud to where your neighbors are going to be like, what is that guy doing, talking to himself all the time? But just enough for you to make kind of a sound come out of your mouth actually helps us focus because our ears are more used to, are using it, and now we're like vocalizing the things, so it's less like just stuck in our heads. I've found generally if focusing on prayer is difficult, the more I'm able to involve my body in it, whether it's walking around, we'll talk about some of those things. I just find it to be helpful. So, so vocalizing prayers can be helpful. On that topic, walking around or pacing. You could pace around the room. You could walk, if you're inside your house, you could maybe walk up and down stairs. You can walk from, say you're going to the shop, walking to the shop and walking back could be a thing. You could go on a walk for the whole reason to pray. Which I find really helpful, to leave the house or after I'm done dropping Colin off at school, I'll walk back and walk a certain way or go through a certain place and just walk to pray. The whole point is to pray, but I'm walking while I'm doing it. I find I get focused a little bit more. And also I see things and interact with people more, and then I pray for them as I come across them, or I pray for a particular street as I walk by. One thing that other people have found helpful that's never really worked for me has been journaling. Writing down prayers. Some people that works out really well. In fact, some people typing out prayers works really well. There's one person in particular in America that prays for us, for our family, and for Redeemer, and she will type out her prayers and email them to us. They're amazing prayers, and that's just one way in how she prays well. That just doesn't really work for me. But it could work for you. And I know a lot of people have a lot of success with journaling. It doesn't have to be something amazing for you to look back at. It could just be you're writing it down just to pay attention, and then at the end you chuck it in the bin. It's kind of like whatever works. It's at the level of pragmatism here, just to get us praying a little bit more. Use the Bible as your prayer book. So as you're reading the Bible, whatever it is that you read that day, a verse, a chapter, a bunch of chapters, just pray those words, pray them back to God. That will kind of give you a reason of going back. Now, it might be weird if you're in like an Old Testament narrative of, or a genealogy or things like that. But most of the Bible, you're going to be reading things that you'll be like, either You'll know how to, what that means for you in your life. Oh, I'm reading this, I know this has to do with, me loving other people well, or whatever the thing is, me enjoying my relationship with God, or whatever it is. Or it could be, I have no idea how in the world this applies to my life. And those are two really good places to start with prayer. So use the Bible as your prayer book. And what I find especially helpful is praying through the Psalms. The Psalms run the gambit of our emotions as humans. You will not find an emotion that we have that's not in the Psalms. So to pray through them, I find to be easy and also really build me up, especially in difficult times. So right now we've just been talking about individually, but we're a church. We should pray with people. So praying with others should be a thing that we do as well. Now, of course, we do that on Sunday mornings, part of our worship gathering together. And that should be part of our missional communities and however we're working prayer into them. But maybe beyond like a formalized, organized thing, what does it mean to pray with other people? It could be a core group. And if you're not in one of those, you can get in touch with someone at Redeemer, myself or whoever. We can put you in one of those. Could be with friends that aren't necessarily in your missional community or in a core group, but it's just people you get along with. And so you want to pray for them. It could really just be a WhatsApp group just for the thing of trying to get, one or two people to pray more often. There's 3 people who get together. I want to pray, 2 times a week, because right now I'm praying either 0 times or just once maybe if I'm lucky. And I just want to pray twice a week. Start a WhatsApp group with somebody else and talk about because we will all need to pray more, I'm sure, and ask them to hold each other accountable. We'll all be in different stages, and that's completely fine. Some people are praying every day, some people aren't. Some people are praying every day, but the prayers maybe feel like kind of old and stale, and some people maybe pray once, but when they do, it's amazing. We are meant to help each other to walk through this. So there's lots of different ways to connect with each other through this. I remember one of my first jobs, I was an intern, eventually became one of the associate pastors at a church. Every Tuesday morning, it was kind of a staff meeting, but also anyone who really wanted to come. Every Tuesday morning from 6:30 in the morning to 7:30, we prayed. The Bible was open, and there was normally like 8 to 12 of us or so. A few of us were staff, and we would just pray for that hour, for whatever was on our hearts, pray for the church. And that was in my calendar every Tuesday. And praying with other people, hearing other people's prayers, that changes what you pray for. Because you'll be praying for one thing, and that'll spur them to pray for one thing, and then that thing you think is something that from that it ends up being just like a conversation is, and it goes around. So pray with other people really does help keep us focused and keeps those distractions at bay a bit. And let me also say too, again, different stages of life are going to have different levels of distractions. Don't expect life to be the same as things go by. So as distractions rise up, you have to think of maybe ways to get around that, maybe different times of the day. You're like, oh, but I'm not a morning person. Maybe you need to become a morning person. I don't want to get up early in the morning, but I do, because I think praying is more important than not. And I know if I don't get up before Colin gets up, I'm probably not going to have a really good prayer life that day. It's just weird. Even if it's just 20 minutes before he gets up, it's just weird. If I pray for those 20 minutes, the rest of my day is so much more prayerful. So there's a priority level here. Now that's not going to be the same for everybody. That's just how it works for me. And so you might be like, the evenings, that's the only time I really have to just kind of chill and not do anything. And I can't get up in the morning because this and that. So then pray in the evenings then. And I'm sorry that you don't have those 5 or 10 minutes to get your Netflix time that you needed. But what's more important than Netflix is talking to God and having a good relationship with Him. And if this is a great thing to ask other people about, this might be something worth sharing even in your missional community. What are the best times for you to pray? When are you least distracted and can focus most on God? Or when are the times where you feel like you most need to pray? That can happen in a really good non-judgmental group conversation. Now, lastly, we've just been talking about how to avoid distractions, but there's another really good point, and Paul Miller makes this point in this book, A Praying Life, which is fantastic. It's probably the best book. Actually, no, it is the best book I've ever read on prayer. So if you're like, I want to read a book on prayer, read this one first if you haven't. But one thing that he brings up is, and I think it's very wise, the distractions that we have, don't try and keep them, don't try and guard yourself against them, let them in. and pray about them. So say you're trying to pray and your kid's driving you crazy. Now your prayer life is going to be about your kid driving you crazy, your heart related to your kid, what it means for you to be a good parent, what it means for you to set good boundaries for your children, all the things that's going to bring up. So maybe the solution isn't to keep the distractions at bay, because we're never going to have a distraction-free zone. But when those distractions come in, to offer them up to the Lord. God knows you're distracted more than you do. In fact, you probably fool yourself as to how you think you're not as distracted as you are. God knows this more than you. So why not bring those to God? Either way. Now, it'll be wise to maybe work around it sometimes, but it's also wise, and kind of how a child works, dependent, trusting child, to bring those distractions to God himself, whatever those things might be. So those are some things about distractions. Hopefully that will be helpful in your own prayer life, especially as you talk about distractions and how to kind of work with them or work around them with other people. Our next session is going to be about systems and tools for prayer, and we'll talk about that in the next session. Thanks.